Welcome back, everybody. In today's video, we're going to be breaking down yet another mock draft. It is Sunday in which we are recording this video, and there was a new mock draft made by CBS Sports. So we're going to take a look at what they're predicting is going to happen, and we're going to assess as to whether we agree with the logical idea of these picks being made, as well as surmise what we can expect from them in fantasy.
Yeah, and the NFL draft is creeping up slowly but surely. We only have a couple weeks left, so we're definitely excited. So let's go ahead and get jumping right into it. Now, most people's consensus number one overall pick, it's going to be Cam Ward to the Titans. Obviously, the Titans are kind of in a rough spot right now in terms of their pass catchers and overall talent on offense. But Cam Ward's going to slot in there, probably a starter week one. How do you feel about this? I know we've talked about it enough, but I think it's a fine landing spot. Definitely should be a first-round rookie draft pick.
And something we had mentioned in other videos is that, it is possible that they load up on receivers in the draft. So while it definitely looks bleak with them only having Chig and Calvin Ridley at the current moment, there's always a chance that they're going to end up taking more receivers and getting him more help in the pass game. But at the very least, he should have an improved offensive line and a good running game.
Yeah, also, how do you feel about them perhaps taking a guy like Xavier Restrepo to pair back up with Cam Ward in like the third or fourth round this year? Obviously, we're not big on Restrepo, but I think that would be a little exciting, right? So, because they've been so productive together at Miami.
Yeah, definitely, familiar face. They'd hopefully be on the same page after, working together for at least 1 year. So that would potentially be good. And I'm guessing they'd probably be able to get him, fifth round or later, probably?
Yeah, perhaps. I think NFL Draft Buzz has him in the fourth round right now, so we'll have to see. Since that pro day performance really tanked his draft stock in a lot of people's eyes. All right, moving on to number 2, Travis Hunter to the Cleveland Browns. This is as high as I think we've seen him go in any mock drafts. Definitely probably 50-50 between Travis Hunter and Abdul Carter. Obviously, we prefer Travis Hunter just because he's an insane talent. How do you feel about this? I think the Browns get an absolute electric playmaker on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, I've been hearing that people in at least the Reddit Dynasty community have been saying that if he goes number 2 to the Browns, that they're probably going to take him 102 in a rookie drafts, right? I personally don't think that's the best move for us because, all right, so he's going to have to compete with Cedric Tillman, Jerry Jeudy, David Njoku. Who do they have at quarterback, right? They have Flacco, Kenny Pickett. And then, their secondary really isn't that great either. They have, obviously, Denzel Ward, who's a lockdown corner, right? But Newsome really isn't very good. So I don't know that he would be an exclusive wide receiver on this team. Even if he is, there's a lot of target competition and there's no quarterback on this team. So I don't know if I would be quite as high as some other people have been saying they are on this landing spot. What do you think?
I would much rather him go 4 to the Patriots, right? I think that would make a lot more sense. Even the Giants, right, at 3. It's probably the worst landing spot that's realistic, right? I don't think Travis Hunter goes past the top 5 picks. So, yeah, in terms of his fantasy production as a wide receiver, I think the Browns are the worst case scenario. Obviously, they have, one of the worst quarterback situations as of right now. Joe Flacco's cool, but he's also like 42 years old. And like you said, they already have 2 or 3 prominent pass catchers in that offense already. So, I wouldn't be surprised to see him in the offense, but very, very limited workload for sure. Moving on to number 3, Giants get Abdul Carter. That's an absolutely great pick. I think he's got some flaws, but in terms of some of those high-end traits like that first step, that's perfect. And I've also seen them linked to Jalen Milroe in the second round. So if they can get Abdul Carter and Milroe to kind of sit behind Russell Wilson for a couple of years, I think that would be a perfect start to a rebuild that the Giants are in desperate need of.
And you can't forget that closing speed and chase down speed, right?
Yeah, he shows me some inconsistent effort on run plays, especially if the runner gets past him. But in terms of his pass rushing prowess, It's very impressive. Moving on to 4. Wow. I haven't gone over this mock draft yet, so I'm going to be definitely a little surprised. Will Campbell all the way up at 4. I would definitely not take out the possibility of receiver here, but they go with, in my opinion, a guard, but I guess he can play tackle too. His tape looked decent. Will Campbell, they do need more offensive line help. Drake May is going to be needed to be protected for at all costs, right? So, yeah, I think it's a fine pick. I think it's just a little too early for one of these tackles, but, who am I to say?
I could trade down,
Yeah, that's a good
in
trade
my
down
opinion.
spot. Yeah. All right, moving on to pick 5. Mason Graham goes to the Jaguars. I think this is like it's been the same pick in every mock draft that we see. Obviously, they could get another receiver, but it's way too early to pick a receiver. They're in desperate need of defense as well. So, yeah, that makes a lot of sense there. Yes, I love this. All right, Ted McMillan goes 6th overall to the Raiders. He's got one of the weirdest fluctuations within this first round. Some people are even saying he's not a first round talent, and then you see him go, late first to the Buccaneers, which makes no sense now. I've seen him go to the Saints, right here to the Raiders, right? So I love this landing spot. They have literally no one besides Brock Bowers and Jacoby Myers, who I don't really think is all that great either. So Ted McMillan would be that X piece that they desperately need right now. So I think this is one of the best landing spots for him, regardless of what quarterback they trot out there next year.
Yeah, so it's probably going to be Geno Smith. Obviously, they could take a quarterback in the second round potentially. Now, going back to our sell high videos for tight ends specifically, right? We had Brock Bowers as a potential sell high candidate. If this were to happen, I really don't think he's getting the target share that he did this past season, right? And while he would still be a fantastic tight end to own, right? I think this is one of those scenarios where they're both going to be able to eat, but I think it would both limit each other's upside just having that alpha playmaker on the same team.
Yeah, and some people question that alpha playmaking yak ability, but if you watch film, Arizona obviously they weren't very good this year, and the quarterback situation at Arizona was not very good either. And Ted McMillan didn't really care. He was still getting the ball an insane amount, put up a great season this year and last year despite that. So, yeah, I think Ted McMillan is clearly our wide receiver 1 if Travis Hunter doesn't become a full-time wide receiver, which we don't think he is. But, yeah, I mean, this is going to hurt Brock Bowers and Jacoby's fantasy production, in my opinion. So, all right, moving on. Jets definitely need a tackle here. I would argue that they also need quarterback. Justin Fields is cool, but I don't know if he's the long-term answer. He looked decent last year with the Steelers, but was not putting up nearly as much points as he needed to. But offensive tackle here makes a lot of sense. Mike Green had an absolute ton of sacks this year at Marshall. The Panthers are kind of in need of everything. Edge is a good start. So then Shadur Sanders at 9. So, with the news of Derek Carr coming out about him potentially missing a lot of time with a shoulder injury that could end up needing surgery, Shadur Sanders does, make a little bit of sense here. I don't necessarily agree with it because they need everything else, especially on defense. And Spencer Rattler, he had nothing to work with last year and looked okay. So I don't know if this makes sense to me. But Shadur Sanders going to the Saints at 9. It's a decent landing spot. How do you feel about it?
So as far as Shooter Sanders is concerned, he would almost certainly in this scenario be playing right away, given the nature of Derek Carr. As far as the pass catchers are concerned, I think it's a win for Chris Olave, and that I think Shooter Sanders is good over the middle of the field in the intermediate area. And I think that could be a spot where Chris Olave could eat. Now, the vertical passing game with Rashid Shaheed, I think, would be greatly negatively affected by this draft selection. I don't think Sanders has the arm talents to get the ball out deep down the field with any kind of zip. So I think that Olave would be boosted here, but it would really hurt Shaheed. And then uh, the offensive line has degraded slightly from what it once was there in New Orleans. So I mean, at least he's getting the draft capital. But yeah, like you said, I think he could definitely make a lot of better selections here than Shitter Sanders.
Yeah, and obviously we're notorious for, being very low on Shadur Sanders. I think he's our QB 10 right now. A lot of issues with him that we saw on film, and I don't think the Saints have enough talent on the offensive side of the ball to negate all of those red flags that we saw. So moving on, Ashton Jeanty to the Bears might be one of my favorite picks for the Bears. I don't think they do this necessarily, but I mean that would be the perfect David Montgomery type of runner for Ben Johnson, and they do still have DeAndre Swift. I think he'd work into a smaller role, obviously, and Jeanty would be kind of the exclusive guy in that offense. With DeAndre Swift being there, he'd kind of provide a change of pace aspect to that offense. But with Ashton Jeanty, I mean, he's our RB1. He is absolutely fantastic, does everything well, breaks tackles at an alarming rate. The Bears have really revamped a lot of their O-line. Ben Johnson's offense is going to look absolutely electric here next year. And honestly, if Jeanty goes to the Bears at 10 here, I would be surprised if they're not a top 10 offense next year.
Yeah, I don't like the pick personally. Like, it's fine. He would be a great fit for the offense. I think they should go offensive tackle here personally, or trade down. I think that you could get somebody that's a fine running back like Henderson, Judkins, maybe even Caleb Johnson later on down the line if you want to get that power component. Although Henderson isn't, the biggest power back by any means. I definitely think you could get a solid running back prospect later on in the second round and help yourselves out with offensive tackle. But as far as from a fantasy perspective for Jeanty, probably couldn't ask for a better landing spot, honestly, that's realistic, right? And yeah, in that Ben Johnson offense, he would be putting up tons of points. And that would help Caleb Williams out as well as the pass catchers because you want to talk about a threat in the running game to take the load off. That would definitely provide it.
Absolutely. All right, number 11, you got Jalen Walker, very talented edge threat out of Georgia. 49ers need a little bit of everything. They lost basically their entire defensive line outside of Nick Bosa, so they're definitely going to need some replacements there. Then Golden gets picked at 12. We're not the highest on Matthew Golden, right? We definitely see some issues on tape. Obviously, he's fast. But outside of that, there's some nuances that I think he's lacking. But definitely needs that Brandon Cooks replacement. I think he would slot in immediately and be that Brandon Cooks replacement. I definitely like the landing spot. That passing offense has been very up there in terms of volume over the past few seasons. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, I think it would be a good fit for Golden. It wouldn't have to be the wide receiver one. Obviously, CeeDee Lamb would be getting a ton of attention. We've seen that it can be at times a high volume offense in terms of the passing game. He would have a competent quarterback, obviously, in Dak Prescott. So I think that would probably be one of the best situations imaginable for him because he would not have to be the wide receiver one. I don't really think that he, unlike players like Brian Thomas and Malik Neighbors from last year, I think they were immediately ready to be wide receiver ones in their offenses. I don't really view Golden in the same light as a prospect personally, but I definitely think that, a perspective of quarterback play and potential high volume, that it would be a good fit.
Yeah, I definitely agree there. Will Johnson goes to the Dolphins. I think that's a great pick. Moving on, Tyler Warren goes 14 to the Colts. Weirdly enough, this is going to be a little crazy. We haven't seen Tyler Warren drafted in the top 10 yet, but on some bookies' websites, He's actually minus 160 to be a top 10 NFL draft selection, which is kind of crazy to me. Obviously, the Colts landing spot's not the greatest due to the quarterback situation. Anthony Richardson can't hit the broadside of a barn within 10 yards. Hopefully that changes next season. If not, Daniel Jones is going to be out there, and I don't like that as much. It's not much better. But Tyler Warren, absolutely amazing playmaker with the ball in his hands. One of the most versatile tight ends I think I've ever seen on film. Like I said, the landing spot's not the greatest, but the Colts definitely do have a need at tight end, even though they just signed Mo Alley Cox to a deal, I believe, earlier in the week. But, yeah, how do you feel about this landing spot for old Tyler Warren?
Well, besides helping out the tight end room, he could potentially help out the quarterback room, right? He might be the best quarterback they have on the roster, honestly.
Yeah, he
Kind of a
has
joke.
he has a tight end, a quarterback background. He played a little bit of quarterback in high school and was recruited, I believe, as a quarterback and then transitioned into the tight end. He's a big guy, so it makes sense.
Have you
Um,
seen them? Have you seen them mocked to take anyone or anything but a tight end yet? Maybe
uh,
one mock draft.
no, the only variants that I've seen is Tyler Warren and then Colston Loveland, right? One of the two. I mean, they definitely have other needs, right? I think edge would be a need for them. Maybe another corner. Obviously, their linebackers are tackle machines. Uh, Maybe offensive tackle, maybe. But I mean, tight end's definitely the biggest glaring need for them, in my opinion. Shamar Stewart, thank goodness he doesn't fall all the way to 32 for the Eagles to take. The Falcons are last in sacks over the past, I think, 10 years by a considerable margin. So I think Shamar Stewart, absolutely elite athlete, can come in and make an impact more than likely immediately. Mykel Williams, the Cardinals need pretty much everything, in my opinion, including quarterback. Kyler Murray, I just don't think is the answer there long term. But Mykel Williams, very versatile edge rusher. I think the Cardinals can definitely use that as well. Gray Zabel, most people are thinking he's going to be a center at the next level. The Bengals, if I was a Bengals fan, I would be very concerned of them taking a non-defensive player in the first round. I think they absolutely desperately need something because they're probably losing Trey Hendrickson, which means that's their best player on defense gone in an historically bad defense. I mean, Joe Burrow put up like 45 touchdowns, like 6 interceptions, and almost 5,000 yards, and they missed the playoffs. So, yeah, they definitely need to go defense here, in my opinion. Kelvin Banks to the Seahawks makes a ton of sense. Let's get zero pressure on Sam Darnold because if he gets pressure, we all know what happens. Jihad Campbell, linebacker, definitely don't need offense for the Bucks. All right, another one of our favorite landing spots for a running back that we're not necessarily as high on as other people, but Omarion Hampton to the Broncos would definitely skyrocket Omarion Hampton up my rookie rankings if he actually gets this landing spot. Absolutely fantastic landing spot for him. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think he would buck the trend of the rotating backfield for the Broncos if they invest first round draft capital in a running back. Obviously, players like Estime uh, and McLaughlin, although McLaughlin and Javonte Williams were there before Sean Payton, I believe. We'd seen that mystery backfield where you couldn't even pretend to guess you would know who was going to get 5 to 10 touches any given game. I think this would buck the trend there. As far as the offense is concerned, I think they have their guy in Bo Nix. They have Cortland Sutton. I would hope they take tight end or wide receiver in the second round if they do this because you can roll out there with Marvin Mims, Cortland Sutton, and Troy Franklin and the like, but I would prefer not to.
and the best big slot in the NFL, Devon Vele, as well, right? Yeah,
And missionary.
I think Omarion Hampton is basically the best of Audric Estime and Jaleel McLaughlin, right? I think he provides better traits than both of them. So, I know Sean Payton loves his running back by committee running back rooms, but I would be very confused if he decides to do the same thing this season with Omarion Hampton as he did last year. So we'll definitely see there. Moving on to 21, another popular landing spot for this Ole Miss quarterback. Jackson Dart goes to Pittsburgh at pick 21. Let's hope for this instance Aaron Rodgers does sign with the Pittsburgh Steelers, so Jackson Dart does not have to start right away. I actually was recently looking at some more of his film because, some colleagues of mine were like, please look over his film. I think you'll have a different opinion on him. I did it again and saw the same concerns. Very limited as an athlete, in my opinion. Very inconsistent decision making. Some of the worst throwing on the run I've seen in certain areas. In terms of the landing spot, Pittsburgh definitely has some solid pass catchers, but the offensive coordinator there makes me have nightmares every night. Arthur Smith scares me from owning any Pittsburgh Steeler. So, yeah, I think it's a fine landing spot because he'll actually get a chance to play probably relatively soon. But outside of that, I'm not very much into it at all.
I would hope he's not going to play in his first season, his rookie season, if he's taken by the Steelers or his own good. Their running game is now is comprised of Jalen Warren. Yep, that's all. So not a good running game, probably. Sure, he'll have Metcalf and Pickens outside, but that offensive line isn't very good either, particularly. So you would have to hope that they get somebody like Aaron Rodgers so that he could sit at least 1 year. I think, generally quarterbacks going in the latter half of the first round, you might think, oh, well, they're going to be on a better team, so it's a better landing spot. I think this is not actually the case here.
Yeah, so like you said about Jalen Warren being their only back, I would be relatively surprised if they don't go with. I could see them even trading up in front of the Broncos to get somebody like Omarion Hampton because I think he's like the perfect style of back for the Pittsburgh Steelers, right? It replaces Najee Harris with like a souped-up version of Najee Harris. With this pick, though, in particular, I just don't necessarily see the value there. And, Arthur Smith, he's one, he picked a running back when he was the head coach of the Falcons. He picked a running back relatively high, so we could see that happen again. Pick 22, Emeka Egbuka goes to the Chargers. We had another mock draft that we reviewed, I believe, earlier on a few weeks ago. And Emeka Egbuka landed with the Chargers, which makes absolutely zero sense to us because you already have Emeka Egbuka, slightly better in our opinion, in Ladd McConkey. So why are we drafting the same player twice? Kind of, messes with my mind a little bit. I guess you move Ladd out to the Z, and then Mike Williams has like a last hoorah at the X position, right? And then you put Emeka Egbuka in the slot. I do not think Emeka Egbuka should be at the Z or the X position. I think he should be strictly a slot. And that's also how I kind of feel about Ladd McConkey. I think they should both strictly be slot guys. And it just doesn't make sense to me personnel-wise to draft Emeka Egbuka here.
Yeah. Besides that, it's a bit redundant in that they already have Ladd McConkey. They also are in a Greg Roman offense. This is a tight end heavy 12 personnel type of offense, preferably. So, it kind of reminds me in a way of the Seahawks drafting JSN to then just run a bunch of 12 personnel and not have him on the field. Why take a wide receiver in the first round if you're not going to potentially use him? Doesn't make any sense to me. Yeah. So, if this were to happen, you would have to think that Greg Roman's going to, I don't know, try to be creative for once, potentially use 11 personnel at some point. But yeah, very confusing pick, and I highly doubt this is what happens.
Yeah, I know towards the latter half of the season last year, they were running more and more, passing volume through that offense, mainly because J.K. Dobbins got hurt, right? Uh, with Najee Harris there, regardless of what we think about Najee Harris in terms of his efficiency as a runner, he is absolutely durable. I mean, he can take a lot of volume and will not go down and not be hurt. So, with that being said, I think the Chargers will be running heavily through Najee Harris, unfortunately. And I think that 12 personnel trend will continue for the Chargers. Up next, hey, look, the Packers finally don't go wide receiver. Corner, they definitely need that for sure. Not necessarily too in tune with Jahdae Barron, but I'm sure he's fine if he's a first-round talent. Malachi Starks goes to the Vikings. I love that because Harrison Smith is literally 55 years old, so get a replacement for him. And, even let him learn behind Harrison Smith for a year. That would be fantastic. Josh Simmons to the Texans. Absolutely needs offensive line help right now. They decided to just get rid of their best offensive lineman, even though he loves to take penalties. Colston Loveland to the Rams. Haven't seen this landing spot. Tight end definitely makes sense here. They don't really have much in terms of tight ends. I'm trying to think of who they even have. But Colston Loveland definitely can slide into that offense and be effective day one. I think he is one of the most pro-ready tight ends in our opinions. So, yeah, I definitely like this landing spot. Unique landing spot as well. I don't think I've seen this one in any mock draft thus far.
Yeah, so they have Davis Allen as well as Higby.
Oh,
So
Higby. Yeah.
So, I mean, definitely replaceable players, right? So that's not. It's not as if he's being drafted to the Cardinals or the Raiders or something where it would make no sense, and there's no way he would be the tight end one. He would be the tight end one. As far as from a fantasy standpoint, I don't like this actually because he would probably be third in the pecking order behind both Devontae Adams and Puka Nacua. Sure, he'd have Matthew Stafford, but for how long? I'm actually a little bit lower than you might think on this landing spot, personally.
Yeah, I definitely can see that. He's not going to be the priority passing option, right? So, 27, Walter Nolan falls all the way to 27 for your Baltimore Ravens. I love that pick. Tyler Booker goes to the Lions. I like their O-line a lot, but I guess they want more O-linemen. That's fine. Donovan, I'm not even going to say that last name. Edge for, I don't think they need anything in terms of offense, so go ahead and stack up that defense. Nicky Manwari, an absolute stud athlete. That's fine. I think they should also go defense. Wide receivers also on the table for them as well. I would probably lean wide receiver for them instead, but this is too good of an athlete to pass up on. Kansas City Chiefs, they just love taking chances on late first round pick defensive linemen. They've done it for like the past 3 years, and looks like the trend continues here. And then, oh my goodness, this is even worse. This is even worse than Shamar Stewart going to them at 32. James Pierce Jr. has some character concerns. Doesn't matter. He goes to the Eagles. In my opinion, a top 3 to top 4 edge rusher in the class. In my opinion, should be a top 12 pick in the draft, despite his character concerns. The Eagles get him at pick 32 as per usual. So, yeah, this is the whole mock draft. Is there anything past this? No. So, yeah, how do you feel about this mock draft overall? I think there's definitely some unrealistic landing spots, but for the most part, I think there's some good picks here for a lot of these teams.
Yeah, some of the worst picks I think are potentially Colson Loveland, especially Emeka Egbuka. Some of the better ones, players like Omari and Hampton for sure. I love the landing spot for Tet too, and Chenti as well. So yes, like you said, some make more sense than others. It's interesting. I think in the last couple of mock drafts in which we've reviewed, Luther Burden does end up slipping out of the first round, which I think for his fantasy value could potentially be pretty good because if he goes in the early second to somebody like potentially New England or the Titans, I think he could see a significant amount of passing game volume.
Yeah, and the Bears do have 2 second-round draft choices. I
Oh,
mean, look, Keenan Allen's probably not coming back. You could
you
grab
imagine?
Luther Burden. That offense would be stacked. It
Oh.
would be absolutely stacked with Burden there. I think he falls out of the first round due to some of the stupid penalties that he's gotten. He has some uh, hothead tendencies. Kind of like a DK Metcalf, George Pickens. Not nearly as bad as George Pickens, but yeah, I think those types of concerns have limited his draft stock a little bit. But yeah,
All right, what do you guys think? Do you agree with what we think in terms of some of these guys being good in good landing spots, such as Ashton Genty, Ted McMillan, and the like? Do you agree with us or disagree as to whether, Lad McConkey 2.0 and the Chargers offense would be a good or bad pick? Let us know below in the comment section. With that being said, feel free to like and subscribe. It's a free and easy way to support the channel, and we'd really appreciate it. Thanks.
and with that being said, thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.